Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
This episode of the Plant-Based Podcast is brought to you by our friends at Cobra. The Cobra range of garden machinery is constantly expanding and offers the UK's largest range of lawnmowers. With a comprehensive lineup of quality and innovative petrol, electric, battery and cordless products to tackle any gardening task, Cobra is the newest evolution in garden machinery. Visit cobragarden.co.uk for your chance to win a variety of great Cobra products.
Okay, so on the podcast today, we have Nelufar Hadayat. She's an award-winning journalist and presenter who focuses on environmental issues and cultural upheaval as well. And I have seen some of your documentaries and they are impactful. They definitely make you feel completely immersed in the topics and they do definitely challenge our perceptions of the world. So Nelufar is also hosted on many TV channels in the UK and in the US and is on the podcast today to tell us her story and to talk about her series, The Traffickers and Food Exposed. And we're going to be talking about illegal trades of minerals and such like, and yes, of course, plants too. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure. What an introduction. I feel amazing.
We like to make our guests feel special.
And everyone here today is bathed in sun as well because it's the first lovely warm day in England for a while, I think.
Yeah, I would have been a different person had you spoken to me last week, all miserable, shower. And here I am just like spring in my step and all it takes is a bit of sunshine. So
bouncy.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, but take us right back to the beginning because we're going to talk more about Food Exposed in the second half because that's obviously the thing that's most linked to plant-based. But tell us how and why you got into journalism as a whole originally. Tell us your potted history.
Yeah, I guess it started when I was sort of a lot younger. It's a little bit. So my background is I'm from Afghanistan, and the history of where I was born and where I consider myself from, which is British and English, is intertwined. It has been for hundreds of years. Afghanistan's always had a link with Britain, not always in the best way, but of course going on here and there. But it's always been connected. And when the war broke out in Afghanistan, where I'm from, my mum was a refugee. We were refugees of war. And I remember coming to the UK in 1994 and going to sort of school. And my school friends were sort of shout, "Hello, how are you?" Very much in that, in almost like a comedy sketch because it's just because they thought that if they spoke really loud that I'd understand them. Or but it was. But when I came to the UK in 1994, being a refugee or an immigrant was still like a noble, a good thing. You're risking everything to leave everything to try and fight for a better future for your kids. So my mum, me and my sister were like loved and cherished in the estate that I grew up in. So I had a really, really lovely experience of growing up in the UK. And I very much flitter between being Afghan and British. And it's always sat quite beautifully together with me. I've never felt a tension. I've never felt like I've had to pick. I've been pushed a few times, but I've always felt really connected to this place.
That's so
yeah. And it's weird when you're sort of a first generation immigrant, right? So my younger sister and younger brother were born here and sort of they don't know what it's like to have experienced what I did as a child. So I valued things beyond understanding. Like I valued the quiet. Like I came to the UK and the first few years I couldn't fathom the peacefulness. So I was just like, everything has an order and a time and everyone does things on time. It's everyone has a queue. What's this doing Pakistan, you've never seen a queue. They wouldn't know what it was.
Oh my gosh, literally, I hate queuing.
It is, listen, you're lucky to be able to hate it, because when you haven't got one, with money and tickets everywhere. So it felt, the way I am as a person just kind of connected to the UK. And I just felt as though I found home in a way.
That's
so
cool.
that was kind of, obviously I will always be Afghan. That's nothing I want to change or I can alter. But equally, I am British. The beauty of like me ending up here, as opposed to some of my cousins that are in Australia or America or Germany or Belgium, is I feel like they had to pick and I never did. I felt very much growing up in inner London, and everyone's got their own experience. So this is me, I'm not talking for people. I'm not telling people how their experience should feel, but mine was very much like, I didn't have to give up one identity for another. And I say all of this because my first film was in Afghanistan. You know, I went for the BBC. I made an hour-long documentary when I was 19 years old, and I was seeing all the upheaval in the war in Afghanistan at the time, and I was just like, they're people just like you, just like nothing here. Yeah, exactly. And I thought, well, maybe I have a role to play here, bigger than just, myself. Maybe I should show Afghanistan as a place. With people and nice things and good people. And so I went when I was 19 for the BBC. I went and made an hour-long film called Women, Weddings, More and Me. And that was sort of the start of my career. It was never that I wanted to be on TV. It still isn't. Like, I make podcasts and I do radio shows and such. For me, it was always about expressing myself in a way that felt, as you beautifully put it, like as though I was connecting, as though I was making an impact.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. You remember Lalagi Snow? So we've done a podcast with Lalagi Snow, who's written a book called War Gardens.
Yes.
And some of that, have you seen it? She
talks about Afghanistan a lot.
Yeah. And I have a friend, Louise, who actually lived in Kabul for many years. And all that I've ever seen of Afghanistan, apart from looking at, documentaries and history, is we see it as, it is a war-torn place. But in the past, Kabul has been a vibrant, beautiful, colourful, magical place to be. And I've seen some exquisite photographs. And the lady who I know says that if she could go back and it was like that, she would go back and live there because it was absolutely the most magical place to be.
And it really is. I've been back numerous times with my work with the BBC, and I used to present news rounds. So I was I was a news round reporter for 3 years, and they always ask you sort of in your career, like, you can do one sort of foreign small film for the youngins, for the kids on CBBC. And I said, I want to go back to Afghanistan. So my wonderful editors at the time allowed me to go back to Afghanistan because I wanted to show the beauty of the people and the place. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it should be your next vacation after COVID, right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, oftentimes those of us from the developing world get painted into a situation and into do you see what I mean? So
you forget they're real people.
Yeah.
And real
we're
places,
all human beings trying to live life,
Exactly.
Everyone wants to live their best life. I'm going to just tell you a really super quick story. I know this is off track. This is why we have questions. But I do some work at a community garden, and we had this day, which was an international day of celebration. And I'm meandering the garden, making sure that everything's going to plan. And we had a language stand, and there was a guy behind the language stand, and we had all books of different languages, and there was lots of different people there, and it was so lovely. It was all vibrant. Everyone was so happy, bringing everyone together. And this lady kind of walked on up, and she picked up a book, and there were some photographs of Afghanistan. And she said, "Oh, I've been to Afghanistan. I used to actually do some work out there." Wow. And the guy standing next to her said, "I'm from Afghanistan." So they're starting to chat. This is really nice. Anyway, she takes out like literally kind of like a wallet, and she opens it up and she says, "Here's a picture. Here's my daughter when I was there." And anyway, it turned out this guy is from the village that she used to live in.
I mean, that's the point, right? We all come from a village somewhere. Like, it's just so beautiful. What a lovely story.
It was a lovely moment. Honestly, she said, I can't believe it. I haven't been there for a long time. This guy was obviously a refugee, and he was like, yeah, that's my village. And they were chatting about it. It was just absolutely marvelous. It's that human connection.
Exactly. I'm taking the words from my mouth. I feel like, look, you don't get to decide on what situation or what life you're going to be born into. And I just happen to have quite an unusual, atypical upbringing. You know, I was born in the middle of Soviet-occupied Afghanistan, and I live in Walthamstow. Like, it's not normal, really, to think about it. So, but the thing that I've learned along the way, having met all sorts of people, good and bad, around the world, in every continent you can imagine, is most of the time people want to be good. You know, given the option, on any occasion, given the option, almost anyone would pick good. No one wants to be evil or bad, but circumstances point them in that direction. That's not me excusing bad behavior, not at all. But what I am saying is, I know it to be true that given the option, most people would choose good. That's what I'm saying.
I think overall we know that good is the right thing to be and to do. So
being good is easier as well.
It's hard to be bad.
Yeah.
I know you try really hard to have a bad reputation.
I know.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm bad boy. I got a leather jacket.
And a sleeve of tattoos. Don't think I'm... Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so let's talk about some of the work that you've done then. So you did film the series, The Traffickers. Just tell our listeners all about it. Where did the idea come? How did it start? Everything.
I was brought on much after the idea was conceived. So it was the brainchild of Keith Zuma, of Jonathan and Simon Chin, of lots of people at Fusion and Lightbox, these two sort of companies that I was working for at the time. So I was brought on much after, but they knew they needed someone in the film to carry the story along that wasn't going to stand there and be like, this is terrible things happening. Oh, isn't it bad? Oh, let's move on. Oh, there's some more war and fighting. Oh, that's a bad person. He's selling bad things. And I just, do you know what I mean? Like, that was when I started to make The Traffickers, that was typical. It was typical of usually men to stand in front of like burning buildings and be like, oh, there's a horror show. And really, what do we get from that as an audience? Not much. I don't get anything from it. So my entire sort of career has been unpacking things that are really, really hard to understand, but at the same time, making the audience feel part of the story, whether for good or for evil, you know? Oftentimes within The Traffickers, you'd meet a poacher or you'd meet a trafficker or a smuggler or a bad cop or a bad enforcement officer or a bad customs officer. And I'd meet with them and I'd sort of sit with them and we would talk, and it's all the awful things that they've done. And at the end of the day, it's like, oh, well, you know, my mum's got cancer or my dad's this. And actually live on $13 a day, you know. So I learned over the 14 months of filming, you know, 30 countries plus that I went to.
Wow.
I learned that oftentimes it's the systems we create that enable these things to happen. And you can change person X to person Y or Z or however, or whatever you choose. But the outcome usually remains the same. Everybody's corruptible. We all are.
Yeah.
If we were put under pressure, if something was said to be taken from us or given to us, right, we would react differently. And it's really easy. I found it really easy to sit there and have the moral high ground the whole time. But when I had to go undercover in one of the films, I was in India at the border with Bangladesh, and I had to go and pretend that my mother was sick and needed a kidney transplant, and that I had someone who was willing to sell it to me, which is illegal organ trafficking. When I'm telling the story to this doctor to convince him, you know, I'm playing a character, but my God, if that was my mum, would I? Would you?
Yeah.
If it was my mum and she was on her last, you know. What I found through The Traffickers and going and seeing how something is trafficked from the place it is consumed all the way back to the place it originated, and we never skipped anything. We always went for it. We really did, traveled around the world. What I found was there's this undercover world that lives right below ours. And they use the same streets we do, and the same ships and the same planes and the same systems. But this world enables some people to get rich at the cost of others. And it is where I've found that we allow these things to happen because it's just easier for us. So, for example, in the gold episode, in the trafficking of the gold, I've got gold on my phone and my laptop on which I'm speaking with you right now. I can't verify where it came from. I don't know if it's from, places where terrible corruption, terrible entrapment, terrible paramilitary activity is digging these things up. So by melting it down, it almost dissolves me from my culpability. And I learned a lot in those 14 months, but the first thing was to take a deep breath before I judge anyone.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when you put yourself in those situations, it must be so hard not to judge. Like, we're human, you know, and I can't really imagine, like, I really try hard not to judge a person, a situation, but you do sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that must have been difficult. But like you did mention how you want people to be quite immersed in it, and those documentaries do make, like, I was gripped to a couple genuinely, and I think it also, I'm not just saying this because you're on our podcast, I might add, but your style is quite gripping. Like, you're genuinely, and also I think people connect with you and what you're feeling, because it might be that the viewer understands how you're dealing with it better than the actual person that you're interviewing or the trafficking you're looking into. Because we don't have any connection with that. We're like, what? That goes on? How? What?
Yeah. And it's so far away. And it feels, sometimes I go to these places and it feels like long ago, you know, that they still have fax machines, or, you know, they have they don't have broadband. They have like those ADSL connection internet. Like, I'm talking about the past here, but I do find it hard not to judge them in that moment. Some of them deserve to be judged. They're murderers, they're extortionists, they're rapists, they're killers. I'm not beating around the bush here, and I'm not sort of a kumbaya type person, far from it. But I think what I learned over making the Traffickers, and later on when I made my second series, Food Exposed, both of them sort of 8 episodes, so they're really long individual episodes, but really long stories in general. It is so much easier to judge a person because I can direct my anger and ire towards them versus a system that I help prop up because I buy these things, you know, or the governments that are around me benefits from it. I benefit from it in some way because I live in the global north and they don't. So it's over months and months, and believe me, it was months and months, you know, I got to realize that actually, if I can look at someone in the face and judge them, I've gone wrong. Sure. There's something behind that I'm not seeing.
Okay, that's interesting. That is a lesson to learn.
Yeah, so interesting.
Oh boy, did I learn it? Oh, did it take me long enough to learn?
Now, as we are the plant-based podcast, do you have any examples of any trafficking of, say, plants or food crops? What stories have you got to tell there?
Yes, so we looked into this because flora and fauna are both trafficked at exorbitant rates, but it's easier to kind of show a tiger or an elephant or a rhino and be like, oh, the trafficking of these is bad. It's much harder to do it with trees or with birds and flowers. You know, it's hard to be like, oh, what does the tree say? Oh, you really don't like it, do you? It's harder.
I care about plants in the same way as animals.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I do.
Yeah.
Well, I'm learning to, but it's really hard. You know, I'm learning from you guys. But I think we did one episode in Vietnam, and this was one of the earlier ones, and we ended up driving around for 3 or 4 hours, sort of in back end of nowhere, Hanoi, right? So I'm driving around and we get to this one guy and he's just like, I can take you to the rhino horn trafficker. But this village doesn't exist on a map. Literally an entire village with like an entrance wall and everything doesn't exist on a map. So we can't call it in to our office in the UK and be like, oh, we're here or there. It just doesn't exist. So we're just like, we're going to drive in, the tracker's on. That's what we're going to be. We have to follow this lead. So I'm following them. And before we get to the animal trafficking part, there was this chamber full of illegal trees and bits of wood, right? So these are critically endangered plants, and they were being made into jewelry. So little beads of sort of really, really ancient forest wood, really, really beautiful, intricate flowers that had been turned into like still life, like real life pictures. I don't know how to explain it. Sort of, if you imagine a frame and inside it there's a flower arrangement, but the flowers are real, but they are incredibly rare, endangered, hard to find flowers. So it's weird because I didn't know how to feel. I knew it was wrong, but like I said, a rhino, it's easier to be like, oh, poor rhino, there's a dead rhino for its horn. But with flowers or with the trees, certainly, like they had really expensive, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars of sort of beaded sort of tree, sort of wooden bangles and bracelets and stuff.
But is it that they would know that they're endangered? Do they know that?
Yeah, because they know the value of trafficking it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't risk it all to jump into a national park, forage around for 5 or 6 days, like living in the bush, as it were, find these plants and these beautiful flowers and these rare trees and bits of wood. You wouldn't risk it for that if you didn't know what it was worth. So, of course, they knew what it was worth. And I remember he was saying to me, like, oh, do you want this one? I'll give it to you for $100. It's actually worth $500-$600. I can't remember what it was at the time. This is years ago now. But what we do to this planet, sort of, I'm a vegan. So I always kind of, my limit is do no harm. Like, don't hurt me. And whatever your interpretation of that is, I'm happy with. I'm not going to force myself onto you. You don't force yourself onto me. But what I find with plants and with flowers and with trees is when you look at them in isolation, they look insignificant. When you look at them in their habitat, that's our home. So it's easy to look at a plant the way I was in that frame and like it's totally out of context, right? But when I imagine what the earth had to do to allow for this little thing to happen, to bloom or to be, then I realized the cost of it. But we tried really hard to make a couple of episodes work, especially on the timber and the wood trade, and especially in sort of the exotic flower trade. It was just really, really, really hard to get into. And it was very hard to kind of express the loss we were seeing. This is years ago now. Now there's an appetite for this stuff. But at the time, sort of what I was doing was cutting edge, breakthrough stuff. So
yeah, that's interesting actually, like how you see plants and trees now. And to me, it's like every single thing that we do has an impact. Everything. If you stand on an ant, it has an impact. If you pull up one plant, you are impacting all the life in the soil. You're impacting the life of that plant, the bee that would come to pollinate it, whatever it grows on to be. You're impacting the evolution of that plant because it won't go to seed and make more plants. And we forget that everything that we do has that massive impact. And with like exotic and rare plants and endangered species, it is obviously about that species, but also that impacts all the plants around it. It impacts the environment in which that grows in, that eventually impacts
the food for animals
and the food for the animals that, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the I feel terrible because I didn't used to think of it like this. For me, I used to think of it as like there for the taking. And I'm really honest with my audience. I will be the first to put myself out there and be like, I failed, I did a bad thing or I learned this thing. But especially when it comes to the wide, like we talk about climate change and we talk about gas emissions and such, we very rarely talk about the habitat loss. For the flora and the fauna, like in the Amazon, for example. And when it was only after I made Food Exposed, which is really the next step to the Traffickers, that I realized, like, oh my God, we need to hold our heads in shame and really sort things out because of what we are doing, like monoculture. When I learned about that and Oh my God, it's way scarier than the Big Bad Trafficker.
I can't wait to talk more about food exposed. And also, on that note, I remember watching a documentary about a blue agave, how that's obviously that's monoculture, and to make tequila, it's the only agave that makes tequila. But now that's becoming a massive problem because obviously the demand for tequila across the world is massive, but you can only have this one agave makes this particular this tequila, and so obviously that's completely depleting the land now. What happens then? What happens? Do they just go and deforest another area to grow more agave to make tequila?
From my investigations that I did over, another 12, 14 months, yes, they do. They move on. And because these corporations, and I don't want to name corporations because it will just change tomorrow. I'll name a company. 2 days later, it's been rejigged and moved from Ireland to Panama, and it's a different company. So it's no good just saying that, but saying this company or that company. What we have to say is the industries that we allow to happen.
Yeah.
We've allowed the food industrial complex, this apparatus that we've created to do that. So they go to Argentina, they kind of create this monoculture of soy that they then feed to the beef that we then eat as cheap meat or whatever. And they do that, and then they'll just pick up everything and move somewhere else. That's what we found, in our documentary making, in our investigation.
I know lots of people always say to me, like, I'm vegan as well, and people always say, oh, well, vegans, they, all the soy, they're making and eating all the soy. And I'm like, well, actually, most of the soy is made to feed the beef that you're eating. So, whatever. But let's not go down that route today.
No, this will be a 4.5-hour podcast, and by the end of it, we'll be tequila.
So before we go on, I'm really, really, really interested to know if you've ever been in a situation when you're filming that you have felt properly scared. Like, is there one standout moment where you genuinely think, oh my goodness, I was going to swear then, but I didn't.
Yeah, no, you don't do that because I've done a naughty. But there were multiple times when I was quite worried because obviously the thing is if you were watching me at the time, you would have thought absolutely normal, nothing's going on here. But I know the context of who that person is, what they've done, how much they're worth, where their money is kept. And we did our due diligence. We applied and satisfied Ofcom rules and regulations within the UK. So, and the United Kingdom broadcasting rules and regulations that Ofcom has are the most strict in the world. I can't think of a country that has better regulations on journalism. And obviously, after the Leveson inquiry, we had a new set of instructions of what the police can and can't say and can and can't do and such. So with journalists, so we were there, and everything we had double source and done all of that. But there was this one particular moment, and I've never told the story because at the time I must have been young. And I was just like, yeah, bring it on. And now I'm and I was just like, I'm going to prove all these guys that little brown girl can do it,
I can't wait to hear this.
So I'm there, and we're in Nigeria, and we're at a border checkpoint. Now, oh God, you learn over time to be very, very, you learn what is an official checkpoint and an unofficial checkpoint. Right? We're talking highway robbery. We're talking the days of horse and cart, and then getting a gun or a sword out and chopping people's heads off and such. So that's what it felt like at the time. But I remember we were in Nigeria, and the car gets stopped at an official checkpoint, and I noticed what they're wearing, their uniforms and such, and they look at our paperwork, they give it back, and on our merry way. 2-3 hours later, this was a long drive, we were on our way to go and speak to a government whistleblower, right? So big deal, impossible to get a hold of. And we stopped by this, I'll call it a gate, but I mean 2 bits of wood that were strapped together in the middle of the road. There's nothing around. There's no village. So a checkpoint to what? Do you see what I mean?
That scares me.
Yeah. And remember, I'm sleep deprived. We work 16-hour days in the heat, in the cold, in the rain. It doesn't matter. You film. Every day you don't film is very expensive. So you film. You will film. So we're there, and I'm just sort of like, barely with it, just catatonic from needing sleep or whatever. And we stop at the checkpoint, and I look at my director, and he went, "It's a bad one." And we sat there, and the driver, I'm a female, my director's a female, the driver is a male. I'm sat in the front seat, my director's sat in the back seat. I went over to the window to the man and went, "Where are you taking these women?" And he's like, "Oh, we're going to the beach resort," which is where we were going. And he was like, "I'd like all of their passports, please."
Oh, gosh.
And we're like, no, we have press passes. "No, I want your passports." He takes them, he walks off. 20 minutes he was with those passports. I have no idea to this day what they were doing. And like from the depths of my soul, I knew something was going wrong. 3 or 4 other men come. They've got guns on either side of their arms. We don't know what's going on. After a little while, I was like, "I'm getting out of the car and I'm going to talk this through." And my driver looked at me and he said, "I know you know this is dangerous. I can tell. I'm telling you, they're deciding whether to kidnap you or not. Because they've seen your British passports, so they know you're worth something."
Mm-hmm.
So, no, it ends well. I'm here. But he said, "Look, you're going to have to trust me in this one. You're going to have to play like you're idiots, play like you're tourists, like you don't know nothing. You're going to have to bimbo it up a little bit, and I'll pretend like I'm sort of in charge of this. I'm taking you on a tour." Michael and Mary, I swear to you, my heart was just like I could feel it bumping out of my chest. Wow. And the driver went out, did whatever miracle he did, came back without our passports. And I was like, "We need those because we have no other identification. We're in the middle of nowhere." And he was like, "Oh," this man was streaming with sweat. He went out. I don't know what he did, who he gave money to, because he must have done. There's no way they were going to let us go. And he came with the passports. I've never seen anyone drive off so fast in all of my life. Just like, on these like dirt roads. But those sort of moments that, you were asleep in the back of the car and then someone's considering extortion and kidnapping, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of... I don't
even know what to say.
Yeah. And that never made it in the film.
Well, you heard it here first. I know that this is all in the name of investigative journalism, yes. And I think that's incredible. But you are a very brave person. That's
why?
Epic. I know, but that is. I know. I kind of also knew you were going to say that, but I do. It is brave to put yourself in those situations in order to tell the story to reach people. That's pretty incredible.
Honestly, the greatest pleasure, the greatest privilege of my life is to go to these places. I get emotional about this now, but it is genuinely a pleasure and a privilege to sit in front of someone and be like, "Can you trust me with your story?"
Yeah.
I promise you that you might not see any good come out of it, but I will do my best to make something come out of it.
That's really very amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Let's give you some light relief, though.
Yeah, let's give you
We
some
want to know what it's like to work with Morgan Freeman.
Oh, my God.
I'm not bothered. I'm not starstruck by anyone, apart from Damon O, but she wants to do that, Morgan Freeman.
So I've never met the goddess Demi, but I have met Morgan's a wonderful human being. I cherished working on The Story of God, which is available on Netflix now. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I really enjoyed it was first of all, like, imagine getting an email going, "Hey, Morgan Freeman wants to work with you." It's pretty epic, and it just showed like the work that I do is very much in that vein of being very. I'm a very open-minded, a very quizzical, a very curious person, but I try not to make judgments. That's where I get it from. And I remember speaking to Morgan a few times when we were doing sort of the press junkets, and I went into his production company to meet him. Just like the most like cool, like the word cool. Yeah, like it was invented for him. Absolutely, like he's there in his like leather jacket. I'm not even joking. You can't make it up. In LA, just chilling out. But he genuinely believes in the show, The Story of God, and he's curious. He doesn't want to prove a religion right or wrong or any of that. His point is aren't people amazing? And the stories about God in whatever form we tell ourselves are the ones that kind of keep our community together. And how does that happen? And we walk over hot coals in the name of God. We reach high peaks of mountains. We protect animals. We protect each other. And he's really interested in that side of things. So it was an opportunity for me on the story of God with Morgan to kind of like let my hair down, just have like a nice time jollying around Turkey.
Jollying around Turkey rather than getting almost kidnapped in Nigeria. Do you think when you wear your leather jacket, you are anywhere near as cool as Morgan Freeman?
No, almost.
Almost.
Get out.
Get out.
But we're going to move on to part 2 shortly. But just before we go, what's the most memorable of all trips that you've been on? What would have impacted you the most? What did you bring the most away from?
I'll tell a good. The thing. This is a nice one. I went to a place called Svalbard in Longyearbyen in up north, just past Sweden. So this is near the Arctic Circle, and this was a Food Exposed, an episode we did about. You're going to love the story. I've been saving this one. It's a story we did about genetically modified organisms and plants and stuff. And I went to the Global Seed Vault.
Cool.
You know what I'm talking about, Ella Mary, don't you? Everyone else was like, was that just a B&Q up there, was it? Sounds nice. It's like, no!
Like, no, this is massive. This is amazing.
Cool.
Open 1 week every year, so 51 weeks of the year, it's shut, whatever. And I went there with the director, the woman who runs the place. And more than the story of God, this was a profound experience for me, because you go down the sort of mile, you go into the earth, like just they have to keep it so cold for the seeds to kind of stay and not germinate. And we got there, and all the countries on earth submit a box full of their precious seeds and grains and such. So there's a lot of rice grains from all over the world, and we probably only have access to a certain number of rice grains. But in this one little chamber, all of the ones we have on earth, nearly all of them are in here. And the point of the Global Seed Vault is to be the last resort should something happen to humanity. That if we had to rebuild and start again, that this little chamber was where we did it.
Yeah.
And I walk in there, and there's a box labeled North Korea sat next to America. Another box,
the only time you'll ever see that.
There's another box labeled like Iran sat next to Israel. There's another box, Sudan and South Sudan next to each other. And I'm like, come what may, because whether you're from Korea or Israel or Iran or Sudan or South Sudan, we're all alive right now. And that's a beautiful connection. So I'm sitting there looking at like the America box next to the North Korea box, and our precious seeds, like the things that like we would start all over again with, couldn't give a rat's patootie about where it started from. You know what I mean? Like all of it just felt like despite our worst instinct, humanity can do better. And so it's weird. I do such dark journalism, right? So much of what I do feels really terrible, but I am such a happy person because I see these moments and I just think, we'll be all right.
We'll be all right because of those lovely little seeds in the seed bank.
Yes. Oh, time of my life. Honestly,
you can't beat seeds. Hang on a minute. Reminisce. It's some seeds.
You submit them to the seed box, see how far you get. We're brilliant.
Oh, bless.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy talking to you in part 1. And in part 2, we'll be back and we're going to talk much more about food ethics and about the series Food Exposed. And I can't wait because you're so engaging. You're an amazing storyteller. Even sometimes via Zoom, you're kind of like, it's not the same connection, but you're a fab.
And you know the right stories to push our buttons to.
Oh, I've got you. I've Googled you. Sophie Claire's done her job. Don't worry.
Hang on. I've got to do something for you. I've got my own seed vault here.
Oh, wow.
I've got my... It's not really.
Oh, okay.
It's
Wow!
It's my
Oh my God!
There you go.
That's incredible. Are you going to plant all of that?
Well, you can't waste seeds. Nelufar, I'm just starting my own global seed bank and saving humanity right here in Norfolk.
I'm into it. We'll get a shed somewhere and we'll make this work.
She loves the shed.
Good morning or good afternoon, I'm Joey, and once again I'm here with my girlfriend and culinary wingwoman, Katie.
Hi, we are veg-centric chefs and recipe writers, and we're thrilled to share some of our favourite veg-centric seasonal recipes with you here on the Plant-Based Podcast.
We are. We blog on Instagram under our handle @JoeyandKatieCook.
That's Katie with a Y.
And we share many recipes on www.joeyandkatiecook.co.uk.
Today we are sharing our game-changing roasted pepperonata with you guys. It's a one-tray wonder and a do-ahead recipe to boot.
It's utterly perfect for hosting if, like us, you plan on having friends over for a long overdue catch-up soon, as it's made in advance and served warm or at room temperature and greedily mopped up with fresh focaccia or piled onto bruschetta.
Delish. Okay, here's a run-through of the simple method. Preheat the oven to 220 degrees and have an oven rack near the top. Chop red peppers into thin strips and chop a white onion through its root into thin half moons.
Toss your prepped peppers and onions with some olive oil, anchovies, sliced garlic, thyme leaves, sea salt and chilli flakes, and spread evenly across a ceramic tray. Roast at the top of the piping hot oven for 22 minutes. At this temperature, you'll get some delicious char on those peppers, and this will add great complexity of flavour to your finished pepperonata.
Now, here's the crucial bit. After 22 minutes, turn the oven off, but don't open the oven. You may be tempted. Let your pepperonata soften in the residual heat for 10 minutes. During this time, the peppers will fully collapse and give you that molten texture, which is so essential.
The last job is to knock up a seriously punchy sherry vinaigrette, the details of which you can find on our website, and pour this over the warm, yielding roasted peppers.
Altogether, you've got yourself a sweet, tangy, salty, rich, glossy, unctuous medley of deliciousness that's laced with fragrant thyme and bolstered with pungent garlic. It's not for those who favour mild food, we're not going to lie, but for flavour fiends, it's to die for.
Yes. As we suggested earlier, pile your warm pepperonata onto charred sourdough for a winning bruschetta that's perfect as part of a summer spread for friends.
Thank you for listening. We hope that's whet the appetite. And if you're keen for more veg-centric recipe ideas, please check out www.joeyandkatiecook.co.uk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
So we're back here with Nelufar, and in the interim, we've been talking about all different types of coffee. We've talked about veganism as well. So we're really pumped for part 2, where we're going to talk more about food ethics. So tell us why you decided to focus on food ethics, and kind of tell us a bit about your show that you put together as well.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Well, Food Exposed with Nelufar Hadayat came about when the channel that I was working with really, they made a lot of money from the Traffickers, and it got a lot of success. And they were like, oh, she's really good at this. And they went, well, what would you like to do next? And this was back in 2017, just before sort of the vegan movement and the food ethics movement and the environmental food movement really took off, sort of 2016, 2017. And at the time I was a vegan, but I was finding my feet. You know, I was still... I don't want to sound righteous or anything, but I was still on the path to finding my veganism, because every vegan is different, irrespective of what they tell you. We all have different limits and lines. And I knew that food was going to be the next big thing. And so I pitched this show about an 8-part series that looks at food, from superfoods that we believe in, like acai and quinoa and all these berries and such, all the way to pork and how that's made, and the fact that 1 in 5 pigs, I should say, are owned by China. Incredible. And the fact that China, in fact, is investing a lot of money in learning factory farming from places like the United States, from companies like Smithfield and Monsanto and such. So to me, food is I'm not like Anthony Bourdain. I'm not going to go there and like cook up a nice paella, but I was interested as a journalist in where our food comes from and who pays the price for it. Because we don't, I don't. How can it make sense that a whole chicken in Tesco or Waitrose costs £4 or £9? That's not physically possible. So someone somewhere is paying the price for it. And it was it is, to this day, it's the work that I'm most proud of. It's the work that took the most out of me. Like I got sick making it. Like I got.
Did you? What with stress and tiredness? And...
Yeah, I got this thing called secondary trauma syndrome, which is oftentimes, what doctors and fighter pilots and stuff experience, which is when someone tells you every bad thing that happened to them, and then you go in the evening and someone else tells you every bad, and then you go in the morning, and then you go to a factory farm, and then you go to a butcher's, and then someone else tells you of all the time that they've been exploited. Over time, that sits on you and weighs heavy. And if you don't process those people's trauma, it can really mess with your mental health. So it really messed with my mental health. I got acute paranoia. I thought everyone was out to hurt me, and I thought if I didn't do this job, I'd be disappointing vegans, and it was really intense. And my team, especially people like Suzanne Lavery, people like Keith Suma, worked really hard to protect me and look after me, but there is nothing that I saw on the Traffickers that I couldn't reconcile. Almost everything I saw on Food Exposed to this day haunts me.
I think there's only, especially when you are, I guess in the world that we live in, we only see the nice side of it mostly, don't we? So there's only so much that our brains can take that's bad, because it's like, well, it is literally being exposed to the bad stuff. And like you said, I guess time after time, I can't watch like Cowspiracy and stuff like that, because I will dream about it for nights and nights. So what you get yourself through is literally challenging all of the beliefs, everything you've ever been told, all the marketing that's been pushed, and I guess your brain is just going, whoa, what? Hang on, everything is wrong. This isn't what I've known or believed for all of these years.
And the thing that really upset me was all the lies we're being told as consumers. It felt really egregious. It felt like a betrayal. Like I trusted the government and the Food Standards Agency and the European Commission and the European Council to have my back, but they don't. And all these sort of huge global corporations like spinning these myths or not stopping them, like, oh, soybeans are made for vegans. Actually, it's less than 2% of the soy produced on earth that is consumed as soy. The rest of it, we consume them as animals. So learning all the stuff, going to Argentina, going to the Arctic, going to see what crop harvesting is like in Ghana and Liberia, and seeing the fish in the ocean. I teamed up with an organization called Sea Shepherds. I went to the high seas of Gabon to see what we do to our oceans. And really, it's hard. It's really hard to come out of making a show like Food Exposed and feel like we are in for it. If we don't fix up as a people on earth, if we don't fix how we make food and how we use energy, we are not going to have much to live on. Really. So
is that kind of like how do you think about food now, having, seen everything that you've seen? Like, how do you see it?
Yeah, when I started the series, I was vegan and felt like I was better than everyone, really. I felt like, oh, look at that. I don't eat animals. Look at those. Oh, look at my mum. Oh, God, how backwards. Oh, my God, grow up, evolve. Like, honestly, I would say things like that, like, Mum, evolve. Like, she's like, what? I fed you on, chicken curry all your life. You're fine. Look at you. I was like, oh, grow up. But I made the series feeling really like, I'm righteous, I'm good, I'm that. I finished it off, 12, 14 months later, realizing that nobody is exempt from how we choose to grow our foods. We are all part of the system, but we eat food 3 times a day. We don't do anything on earth as regularly or as consistently as eating. We don't pray as much. We don't party as much. We don't call our families. Nothing we do on earth. I consider it a choice you make 3 times a day, at least. And I'm not saying everyone has to get it right and like grow their own eco farms and sustainable whatever.
Although we would all like to.
I would love to. What a privilege to be able to be so connected. But food exposed, especially the episodes we made on like genetically modified crops, and the shows we made on the pork industry, the meat lobby, as they're known, just made me realize here's a scenario, and you'll know this well, Ellen Mary. If a farm is breeding pigs for us to eat, and all the waste from those animals is leaching into the rivers and the ocean and going into the sea and to the other bits of land, doesn't matter if I'm a vegan or not. It doesn't matter if you are or if Michael is. We all live on the same planet. So I got rid of that like super righteous feeling I had of being a vegan, and was just like, no, I've got to stop attacking people for their choices and start loving them for it, and rather than trying to be like, you're wrong and here's why. It's just like, tell me why you've come to believe this story, and let's see what I have learned. And then no one ever says no to being listened to.
Yeah, that's very true. That's interesting.
Yeah. Wow, there's so much to think about here. And I'm just so jealous of all your travels, everything you've learned, everything you've seen. What changes have you seen to food production due to climate change, though? What have you seen along those lines?
By far, one of the biggest problems that I think we don't choose to see as a society is the fact that the majority of the harmful gases that are expelled into the atmosphere is from animal agriculture. We often tend to think of animal agriculture as sort of a nice little farm with a cow over here and some daisies and a little shed, a barn with some hay. And actually, it isn't that. And we think a lot of the time what we say is like, the animals that I eat are grass-fed. The animals that I eat aren't factory farmed. Well, actually, in the developed world, over 80% of the animals you will ever eat are factory farmed. In some places on earth, it's nearly 98%. Mm-hmm. So we feel like we're out of this system, but we're very much part of it. And if Food Exposed taught me anything, it's that. It's learn to love your neighbor because they are protecting the earth around you. If you don't agree with them, don't fight them, don't cast them out. Understand them. You'll learn better and you'll have a better relationship with them. Like, it's this NIMBYism that we have, I think, when it comes to food, right? We think that because it's not happening in my country, it's fine, it's over there. Well, the land, the soil, the ocean, and the wind, the things that make up our climate, they don't have borders.
No, it's just one big planet that we all live on. We're all neighbors. Do you think that plant-based eating is the way forward? Do you think that is the right way to go?
Yeah, I mean, the analogy I always give to people is like, I think everyone should be allowed cocaine. I think if you want cocaine, you should be allowed to go and buy it from a shop. If you want cigarettes, if you could buy alcohol, my God, we all know how potent that thing is. You should be allowed to buy whatever drug you want, right? Equally, and that should be taxed at a rate that's beneficial to the rest of society. Equally, if you want to eat a chicken, pay it for it. A chicken is not £4.
Yeah.
A chicken might be £34. If you want to buy a chicken, pay for it, plus the tax, which should be double. You pay £60 for a chicken, and the benefits of that should go to society. So I'm never one to say you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, and regulate this and regulate that. What I always say is pay the price. What are you going to pay for a gram of whatever you might dabble in on the weekends or whatever? You know that's not what the price of it is, but you're paying for that because that's what you value. And I think we should do the same. I spent a lot of time in Wisconsin with dairy farmers. And the thing with Wisconsin, and it's heartbreaking because I met some of these farmers, is you can either go big or bust. You don't have a choice.
Right.
These dairy farmers these are like strong men telling me how they've had to really like clamp down on their cows and really, really create really harsh conditions for them where their udders are really big. And they have mastitis and are uncomfortable and such because they need the money. And I realized that actually, if anything, those are the people that can help us the most, the people who are paying the price for a dairy industry that's oppressing us all. And if we were to pay them the fair amount, 1 gallon of milk should cost $13, not $2.
Not $2. Sure.
Where is all the money going? Who's paying the price? Those are the big questions that Food Exposed tries to ask.
Wowza.
Yeah.
What?
You just, it really made me think about.
I know. I was just like sitting here thinking.
Sorry.
It's great. It's really great. And you say it still with a massive smile on your face. And I'm sitting here thinking, how can you do that to cows? And how can you do that? And what about
this? The way that she delivered, the way you deliver it, which is just so different and just warming and makes people want to listen rather than being preachy.
No, I don't blame them. But as I say, I learned on the Traffickers, if I can direct my hate at this person, this dairy farmer who told me about horrible abuses of his cows, he'd have a bad day and take it out on the cows. Put it that way. That's what I'm going to say. He'd have a bad day, take it out on the cows. And I heard the story, and my instinct as a journalist, the way I've trained myself, is to think, if you can point your hate to this one person, you're wrong. What's behind that? What is the system that you can't see? What are the processes that are forcing him to behave in this way? And I've always felt as a journalist, I get so much more in return when I ask those questions rather than go, Hank's a dick, maybe Hank's a dick, but that's not what's happening. Right? So
I'm really I'm literally blown away with you being able to, that's why you do what you do and you're such a good journalist, because I'm sitting here thinking, you've just said that, somebody does take their bad day out on another animal. I literally am now angry with this person who I don't even know, and because you can't handle it. It's horrible.
That's fair.
That's why you do what you do, and you're bringing that to us so we can try and understand what goes on.
I'll go through it so you don't have to. I think that should be my motto.
You're a star. You really are a star. Thank you for taking it on the chin for us. Is there something that surprised you the most about the food that perhaps we produce or that we grow or that we sell? Is there something that really stands out that has shocked you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the lobbies that really get to me. So the dairy lobby has hundreds and millions of dollars in America to spend however they see fit. And if you're a dairy farmer, you have to pay sort of a dividends to the lobby, whether you like to or not. And it's always been astonishing to me that the pork lobby has people who go to Capitol Hill or people who go to, Whitehall here in the United Kingdom, and they speak on behalf of this industry, and they will get the huge exemptions from tax. They'll get huge reliefs for their industry. But weirdly enough, that doesn't trickle down to the farmers. So what I learned is we silently enable the system that's designed to squeeze the plants and the animals that we want to eat, squeeze the life out of them, and then to sell it to us at a next to nothing price. That's what I learned. And it's the lobbies, really, honestly, it will only take you a quick Google that put out all the get milk ads, they'll put out all the eat chicken because it's good for you ads, and all the while agreeing to pumping saline into these animals. So it's really easy for me to sit here and say, you should go educate yourself on this, that, and the other. Why? I got paid to do that.
Yeah.
That's my job. I don't expect anyone to have to know the amount that I know because I was paid to know it. So for me, it's very much like, here's a bunch of information, sit with it. It might take you 1, 10, 15, 20 years. Sit with it, see how it makes you feel. And if you can pick up that fork and put that in your mouth after what I've told you, hey, that's fine too.
Ew.
Oh, wow.
Plant. Tell us about something you've discovered about a plant or plants, or something that stands out.
I discovered I'm obsessed with two things on this earth. One are ports. I'm obsessed with ports. If I can get access to a port, I'll always go. The second thing that I'm obsessed with is topsoil. Like, I'm obsessed with soil. I find it really interesting to kind of know how complex soil is, how it has its own time scale that's completely separate to human beings. And these amazing folk who kind of like understand soil, they're like magicians to me. Like, I don't know, it's like YouTube. I'm like, wow. But the thing I learned is that the nutrients in our topsoil is being leached year after year. So the tomato we were eating 20 years ago isn't the same tomato we eat today. And it might look the same. It might be fatter, juicier, plumper, just like the chicken we eat might be fatter, juicier, and plumper, but it doesn't have the same nutrients. And I swear to you, when I learned that, I was just gobsmacked, just thinking, we need to get our food back. Like, we need to get our food back.
We need to understand so much more about how it's grown, how it's produced, how it's sold, the whole process. And topsoil, of course, is being depleted. That's like there's a few films out there talking about soil now. But like, in one spoonful of soil, there's more life than there is humans on the planet. In one little tiny spoon of soil. That's amazing, isn't it?
I love that fact. I'm going to borrow that.
Take it. It's yours.
Well, you love soil so much, but do you grow any of your own fruit and veg at home? Have you got an outdoor space?
May I just say, I do. I am not a green-fingered goddess. I promise you that much. But over the last few years, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, my dad, who is an avid rose grower, I mean, we've got 30, 40 different types of roses in my mum and dad's house.
Cool.
And he likes to sort of cross them so they're all different colours.
That's cool.
He's a rose breeder.
Yes, he's a reader. But he loves it. And him and my uncle, so Nazir and Khalil, they sort of spend summers together, like chit-chatting about roses. But he got me a little pepper bush, just like one you get from like the supermarket. I kept that pepper bush alive for like 8 months, just like
cute.
I was obsessed with it, and now I'm trying to experiment more with sort of herbs and such. But for me, I think I can do I can interview a person much easier than I can like keep a flower alive. I feel like that's a lot harder to do than to interview people. But having said that, look at my lily bush.
Oh, cute.
Show you.
Very beautiful.
It's been like 2 years. Look at that.
Wow.
That's amazing. It looks very healthy and happy.
Yes, I repotted her recently. Got some lovely compost in. I'm trying to like learn all this stuff. So keeping things in the sun and then moving them. See, I strategically pace that to show off because that's the best.
I know.
I bet you get that a lot.
Do you have any more houseplants?
I do, actually. So I've got a small rubber tree that I've had for 4 years that I'm growing, and she's doing well. She gives me leaves very, very often. I have my own little rose bush that's outside. And then I'll take you on a wee little tour. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? Come with me. I'll show you what I got.
This is like roving reporting.
Yeah.
I know, I can't help myself. I literally can't. So that's my little rubber tree.
Oh, pretty good.
This is my basil. Now, basil I grow intermittently, but this one's been alive. That particular one's been alive for nearly a year now. That's a COVID one.
That's very good.
That is very good.
Yeah. And then I've got these little ones here. They're very new.
We're outside now. Oh, little roses.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Azaleas,
They're pretty little
Azaleas, I think they are. They're little azaleas. Oh, this is what? This is my rose.
Because the sky is blue, I thought it was summer.
This time of year.
That's my rose.
That's the rose.
Yeah.
Cool.
Dad said I can have a real one if I look after that one. So I'm still working on it. And I don't know what these are, but I've had them a little while now.
That's an azalea as well, isn't it?
Yeah, apparently I'm really into azaleas. Who knew? Not me.
Well, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's given us loads to think about ourselves, so I'm sure our listeners will
super good. Thank
really
you.
enjoy that as well. And I think really the lesson is, I love that, try not to judge people, think about the whole situation, definitely watch Food Exposed. And, for me, it's got to be about, if you grow your own plants, your own food, you know where it's coming from, you know what it is, you know what soil it's been grown in. Hopefully you are gardening in a sustainable manner, so you're helping with the climate and all sorts. So grow your own food.
Yes.
As much as you can. I know not everyone can, but as best you can.
Yeah.
And it's fun too. And it'll taste better.
Yeah, it always tastes nicer. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. See you.
Hey there, it's Tom again from Forage and Folklore Tours. Today we're going to direct your attention to a wildflower that we're certain you've walked past many times, and perhaps you haven't known what it was, or you didn't know it was edible, or maybe you haven't even seen it because they're quite often very low to the ground and covered by grass growing around it. They are the little purple wildflowers that we know and love as violets. So violets have two different kinds around here in England. There are dog violets and sweet violets. Now, fortunately for us, both kinds are edible and neither are dangerous. So if you get it wrong, it's not a big deal. But dog violets are wildflowers that you may not really find worth picking because they don't really taste of anything, nor do they smell of anything. Whereas sweet violets are actually quite a really nice foraging find. So sweet violets, to tell the difference, sweet violets, they smell quite sweet, as the name suggests, and they taste sweet. So this is a wildflower that you can, in fact, use taste as a method of identifying, which is one of the few I would ever recommend doing that with. But anyhow, if you find some sweet violets, it's definitely quite a lovely thing. Dog violets are much more common, but sweet violets can be used in various different ways for foragers, such as lots of people use them in baking, or they'll crystallize them with some sugar and candy them. But in fact, Ashley and I, our personal favorite use for sweet violets is just using them simply in tea. We either have them on their own or we'll add them to a herbal blend just for a hint of sweetness. An interesting fact about sweet violets, though, is that they are one of the first flowers that was used by the ancient Greeks to, to actually make perfumes. And in the medieval times, sweet violets were actually used to make the first sort of natural deodorant for people, which I'm sure was quite quite a revolutionary thing back then. But what's super intriguing about that is that there's an old saying that goes, you can only smell a violet once. And although that's not necessarily true, there is a bit of truth in it, because they actually have a chemical compound that blocks odor receptors. So as time goes on, when you're smelling violets, you actually will sort of lose a bit of a sense of smell. Works out quite well when you're making a deodorant, and when you mix that with the sweet odor that it has already. The medieval folks really struck gold with that one. But anyhow, no matter how you want to use your violets, they're definitely worth picking and worth exploring. And keep your eyes low to the ground when you're looking for these guys, because they're often hidden in grass, as I mentioned earlier. So, as I said, I'm Tom from Forage and Folklore Tours. If you want to follow us on Instagram, we're Forage and Folklore Tours, or go to forageandfolklore.com to check out more information about my partner Ashley and I and the tours we do, and you can book yourself a walk with us through the countryside.
Cobra is the very proud partner of Series 4 of the Plant-Based Podcast, joining in the celebration of plants, gardens and outdoor living. With over 60 models of lawnmowers available in the Cobra range, there's something for every garden. As a special offer for our listeners, Cobra is offering the chance to win exclusive prizes. Head over to cobragarden.co.uk to find out more.
Right, in our gossip section today, we've got Lee Burkhill, and he's also known as the Garden Ninja. And I really want to kind of find out more about him, because he kind of appeared from nowhere for me about like 5 years ago. And now he's everywhere. He has some amazing YouTube videos. I know that he does a lot of garden design as well. So, yeah, we really just want to get to know him a little bit more. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much for that warm introduction. And yeah, I am a bit like the garden plant virus that just appeared and get rid of.
We wouldn't call you a virus, really. We wouldn't. I think we know you as the big smile, the big hair, and the very good YouTube, educational videos.
I think it's not a bad thing to make an impact.
No.
You know? So, it's fantastic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, my whole approach to gardening, with garden design, which is my main specialism, is to bring people off the sofas and out either into the garden or onto pieces of paper or drawing boards. And for me, like when I started my journey into garden design, I felt very much like the learning curve was steep. It was hard to find out where to start. So all the work that I do really is coming from a place of, well, if I was a beginner again, what would I need to know to increase the chances of me succeeding, rather than just battering people with information or diving in too deep. It's just about giving people the information they need to feel like, I can have a go at this.
That's really good, because I know there's a lot of content out there now. Do you know what I mean? Like when you go online, there's just masses of stuff. And for me, it's like too much. I can't deal with it. Do you know what I mean? So for someone who's new into gardening, where do you even start? And also, I think it might be too overwhelming. Do you know what I mean? As in, wow, there's all this information and all these people are doing it a bit differently. And, and I always see loads of people saying, don't sow too early. And then there's loads of people sowing really early. And then there's this kind of conflict as to, I want to sow early, so I'm going to. And then, and it's like so much info. And so breaking it down like you do into your videos that focus on one element at a time, do you know what I mean? It's actually really, really useful. And it comes from someone who is experienced in it too, which is really good.
Yeah, because there's a lot of I think I especially see this perhaps for houseplants, but people giving advice that have probably only just learnt the advice. And to me, I feel like you need to have worked in it for a while to be able to impart that advice. And that's not me being kind of snobbish and hierarchical, but it's just, it's like anyone can Google how to do something. But it's different when it's someone that's really lived with that advice.
Yeah, and it's tricky because I suppose I share the same view. I will come across so many different blog articles, vlog clips, things on Instagram, and I think, it's great that these people are imparting the knowledge, but the knowledge is wrong. So I kind of think, what's going on? Because you have to have lived it and experienced it to truly be able to advise on anything in life. So for me, all of my garden YouTube or blogs are all based on tried and tested, heart-thought experience, having made plenty of mistakes myself. So when I see that kind of what I call paper-thin advice and content because people want to create, I just think it's a bit of a shame, really, because people are starting off kind of on the back foot because the advice is wrong. So I have kind of a motto that I will explain how to do something, then tell you why, and then show you. So it's kind of like you get the 3 hits of I'll explain it, show you, and why. And if you follow that, then the parts fit together and it should make more sense. Hopefully.
And I think the key to what you just said is making the mistakes. So I do often see, and I love it when I see new people in gardening. I love it, and the enthusiasm is it's infectious, and I want people to be talking about it. That is ace. But if you've just learned something and you've done it once, I don't personally feel like you've learned it, because you need to do that 2, 3, 4, 5, many more times to learn what doesn't happen. Because it worked once doesn't mean it's going to work next time or next time. Do you know what I mean? I think you have to make the mistake to truly know how something works.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
But also, people forget that plants are a living product as well. They're not always going to do what you expect them to do. And I think people are too hard on themselves. And I think when there's this kind of snobbishness sometimes, it's, it doesn't make it feel very achievable for people that are just starting off, I guess. Yeah. Something else that really is kind of winds me up a bit. I sent you this YouTube video last week with all these gardening hacks. And they make all this stuff chopping the top off a carrot, put it on the windowsill, and suddenly you've got 4 carrots.
A carrot, yeah.
And it doesn't really happen like that. And these videos are clearly staged, but they're really fun, but they're really misleading as well.
You're not going to feed your family on a cutting of a carrot.
And it's like clickbait. It's whatever grabs your attention.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes maybe I could be more clickbaity to get more clicks. However, like the true essence of Garden Ninja is, well, I would rather have fewer people watch my content, but it's more relevant and quality over quantity, rather than just let's grab them in and then leave them sort of dissatisfied when that carrot top doesn't sprout into a great feast for your whole family and friends.
I love that. Like, it's really cute for kids to do things like that.
Yeah.
So you're learning about growing food like in a really simple way. Like if you've only got a windowsill or something, that's really good fun. But to actually make it seem like you can, feed people by doing that, that's just incredibly misleading.
On this video the other day, it's really good. I'll send it to you. It's about 20 minutes long, and there's so many different things, but they're just like off the wall. Like there's they have a corn on the cob and they cut down it with a knife, and then they say that sows the seed.
Right.
Cooked corn on the cob. I just don't get it. It's just bizarre. And another one, they slice these mushrooms in half and then put them in a washing basket of soil, and then they cover it, and then apparently these mushrooms grow out the side like these beautiful oyster mushrooms. Yeah. Come on.
From a cooked mushroom?
Not cooked mushroom, but just a mushroom sitting there chopped in half.
And they've always got these perfect hands. The hands are always perfect, and I think that is no way a garden is set.
Although my hands are not dirty that often.
His hands are never dirty. Twice. Once when you've done the back garden, once when you've done the front garden.
But I have to say, the weird thing for me is everyone always assumes that I'm a gardener, but really I'm kind of more of a plantsman, and I've been a product developer. So when people are asking me for garden advice, sometimes it's not that I don't want to answer, it's that I haven't really got that wide, and I don't want to, learn something on the internet and then pass that on. That doesn't feel right. So I kind of have that imposter syndrome a bit, I guess.
I think
No, really not. What is imposter syndrome?
Get bundled together as gardeners, the catch-all. And when people lead to Garden Ninja, he's the gardener. And I say, calling, gardeners, is like calling scientists. It's a catch-all, but you might, have a biologist, a physicist, a virologist, It's too broad a term, and it devalues everyone, because you're then almost seen as just like the help, the manual labour, the person that will come in and plant stuff for other people. And it's not the case. Gardening's a huge, broad specialism, horticulture, botany, but everyone sort of naively bundles us all into this one group that we've all got dungarees on and dirty fingernails on.
And I don't have dirty. I am an outright gardener, and I don't actually have dirty fingernails. No. But I take a lot of time to do the fingernails.
You must have a good nail regime.
But I do. It's daily, because that's just my thing. I mean, they're not long or great in any way, but I don't want them to be mucky all of the time. But I was going to pick up on some other point you just said, and I forgot now.
Well, I'll jump in at that moment. I was just going to say, because something that really irritates us in the industry is that a lot of people outside horticulture see it as very cheap and throwaway. And so that's why, they do randomly, message you and ask, can you help me design my garden, probably for free. And it's because they don't value things to do with plants. And I wonder sometimes if that is why the kind of older generation in horticulture have that protectiveness over it, because of course people have been cheapening it for years and being oh, you're just a gardener. And so I think that protectiveness is also becoming a barrier to actually being inclusive, perhaps.
And I think one thing that I get a lot of is people asking me just a quick question, or I've just got a quick design. And then they'll send me a blank canvas with 100 questions. And I reply, that's design. And you can book in with me if you wish and have a design online consultation. But it's a case of, well, that's not a quick question. That's me asking someone to come and advise my interior design and then provide me with a list of all the items that I need for my new snazzy lounge. And you're right in that a lot of the time we are devalued, and the older gardener may say all this content is giving away all the goodies, but there's definitely a balance between the two. And do I give away all of my skills all the time? No. Do I show things that are helpful? Yes. Does it mean that everyone's going to suddenly turn into award-winning designers? No. So I often say to those older gardeners, just because you show someone, I don't know, how to properly plant a carrot, doesn't mean that you forget and then you can't go on to write an amazing book about carrots or give an amazing talk on carrots. Or, sharing the knowledge doesn't mean you lose it, but it's about giving it proper value. And I think value is the quality of the information, not the frequency.
That's the key. It's giving the value in the information rather than it just being clickbait or just being because you want more followers or more.
And that's what growing mushrooms in a washing basket is trying to do, isn't it?
And talking about being devalued, so I used to work in gardens all around where I live. So it would be what I would do in the evenings and weekends when I was still training. And there was this one guy, and I used to do his garden twice a week. And he had these old English apple trees, and he wanted me to graft a load of apple trees, right? So it was quite a big job because he wanted a lot done, and I had to buy all of the materials, and I probably cut my hands on numerous occasions just because that's what I do. But I got all the materials, spent loads and loads of time doing it. I laid out what I would have to do in order to do that. Anyway, I told him how much that would be, and then I didn't get my money, and then I bumped into him.
He didn't pay you?
Oh no, he hadn't paid me yet, but it was overdue. Okay, and then I bumped into him at a petrol station, and because I just thought I'm annoyed now because this has been a really long time, and that took me a lot of work to do, and Yeah. And I went over to him and I just said, "Oh, hi, how are you doing? I'm still waiting for payment." And he went, "Oh yeah, how much did you say that was?" And I can't remember now how much it was, but I said, and he went, "Oh, well, I'll give you 50 quid.
I'm not allowed to swear, but that's just.
Yeah. I mean, I've had garden design clients that halfway through the design, when it comes to the payment term, and we're halfway through it, but they refused to pay. I said, "Oh, actually, I've changed my mind." And I said, "Well, you just had a week's work from me." And then you get into a bit of a back and forth. And, for this one design client, I just walked away and said, "That's it now." So I don't want to get to the position where I've got loads of terms and conditions. But at the same time, I now have payment windows, so we don't pass the checkpoints until people pay, because you get burnt once or twice. And it's frustrating when you put so much effort in that people compare it to, well, I've seen a similar garden on Instagram. It's like you might have seen one, but how has it been constructed? What's the soil type? What's the plant choice? The preparation is key. And people kind of will show me an image and go, "Well, why can't you just do that?" So if you just want that, then take that to someone and get them to do it. But don't ask a designer just to replicate what you've seen, because the chances are it's not realistic anyway. But there's this view that gardens are like interiors, you can create them and they'll stay fixed like that forever. But like Michael said, they're a moving feast. They're perishable goods, basically, that you're giving life support to and propagating and encouraging. It's a lot of effort.
And they constantly evolve. Like even when you have a garden designed and it's exactly how you think that you want it, your garden evolves, constantly changing. Weather conditions, like different pests and diseases, like anything can happen. Like your life circumstances can change, and you'd be like, "Oh no, I want a lawn now." Do you know what I mean? Like,
and do you know what? Gardens are hard work, which is something that we tend to gloss over sometimes as horticulturalists because we enjoy it, but to an amateur, it's hard work,
So it is a labour of love, but once you get the gardening bug to start to garden, and you start to realise that the effort you put in gets you rewards in terms of flowers or better mental health, better relaxation. I call it like the snowball. Once it starts to roll, it gets bigger and bigger until you are fully immersed in gardening as a hobby. You can't get enough of it. So a lot of the time when I'm designing and when I meet new clients, it's not just about creating something gorgeous that they can sit and admire. It's about getting them involved, dirty fingers in there, understanding the seasons, how the plants work. And if I do my job correctly as a designer with that in mind, then once they've got their garden, that's the first step. And then they're going to be able to completely immerse themselves and almost do like bits of their own design within the design because they're so engaged with it, rather than garden. I mean, the worst garden that I get asked to do is like super formal garden where they've got a gardener and they just want it to look nice all year round. And I just think, because gardens go through seasons, they change. There are messy weeks, there are messy months, there are beautiful months. You've got to take it all in because that's nature. Do you know, it's about working with the garden as it changes rather than I want that fixed, beautiful, toperied garden.
How did you get into gardening in the first place?
So, I've always been a gardener, even as a child. And my granddad was a big kind of make, do and mend gardener. The allotment saw, everything stank of creosote. And there were lots of fruit bushes and gooseberries everywhere. And it was just like a hobby, really. And then as I got through sort of school and high school and had a bit of a rough time, gardening was like my guilty sort of secret, my go-to after a crappy day or week in school.
We've been there.
And yet gardening was always there. And then I just saw it as a hobby, and I went through life and got a job, which was really stressful, and worked really hard. And gardening was always the go-to. And then finally one kind of night after a really rough couple of months in work in this corporate environment, just said, I need something else. And that my husband said, you should really look at gardening and garden design because it's clearly what you've got a flair for. And I said, I've got no qualifications. What am I going to do? And he said, go and get some, do you know? And I did most of my training part-time. I did it over weekends. I jumped on any gardening course I could. Whatever the RHS was offering up, I was there on weekends and just started out with that open mindset of, I know I've got experience, but now I just need qualifications and kind of the rigour to back it up. And then over the course of about 2 or 3 years, I kind of built that to the point where then I was out doing, small garden designs on weekends, and then finally just took the jump and left work and quit. And then it was like, right, the pressure's on because I've got all these skills, I've got all this knowledge, but now you've got to make a living off it and make sure that 365 days of the year you can pay your bills and do all the things you like to do. And that's the real tricky bit, is it's not becoming the designer or the horticulturist, it's managing to make a living. But, we've talked about being devalued. It takes a long time for people to kind of pay proper fees to you for your work and keep that work coming in, because it's a self-employed person. You've got a pipeline, but if you ever have a week or two off, then that pipeline soon dries up. So I'm fortunate with the content I produce that there's a lot of pipeline. I suppose that's why I've got so many avenues to kind of keep the work coming in, because it's my passion, but also it needs to pay the bills. So it's just getting that balance. But I suppose it was just like the need, the urgency to leave a stressful job that was battering my mental health and to follow my passion. And I think once you've got a passion, you've got I have endless energy for it because it like feeds me, it powers me along. So that's the hot version.
Yeah, so how you were saying, it's really hard, it's hard, gardening can be hard work. It doesn't feel like hard work when you're completely immersed in it. It only feels hard work when you get home and you're aching like a biatch.
Or it only feels like hard work when you get a question at 11:30 at night from a design client who has to know there and then the name of these plants, and you're like, I've spent all day designing for you. You can feel a bit unfetched, but I shouldn't complain. They're enthusiastic.
Before you go, I just want to ask how have you found the big P? Oh, P as in pandemic.
Oh my God!
Because this is going
on a complete tangent now.
No, I'm trying to tidy this up now. Sorry.
Good luck.
So with the big P, what changes did you see? And obviously horticulture has become really the king industry because everybody wants to grow plants. Did you see a lot of changes in your own work?
Yeah.
And how do you feel?
Definitely, it's brought about a lot of positive changes. And although it's been a really naff year to 18 months, gardening's taken off. The one thing I have seen, other than the workload being almost unmanageable, is that people are really engaged about using gardens for like relaxing spaces rather than I want something that looks nice. They say I want somewhere where I can work from home, relax,
somewhere to live in.
Yeah, and so they're becoming usable rooms and spaces where people want to get engaged. So for me, there's just been a whole sort of step change in people wanting to really get involved, and that's like my bread and butter because I want to get people involved. So for me, it makes the design process a lot easier because rather than them saying I like these 3 images, can you do that for me, they're saying I want to do this, that, sit out and entertain, relax, roam home. And it broadens the design horizons, so it's great for me.
More immersed in the design.
Yeah, definitely. I think if people are much more aware, probably through online content, about the seasons, if you grow vegetables, they're not going to last all year, and giving them sort of the basics that we take for granted, it kind of expose that to them, and they can now say, actually, herbaceous perennials are longer lasting than a bedding plant, and little things like that have started to change, and people are more open to like longevity rather than instant impact.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, but hopefully it continues. Yeah, I think, even without a pandemic, I think the interest in gardens has increased, and a majority of people, not majority, but a large proportion of people will still work at home. So they'll still be spending time in that outdoor space. So I think it has changed, for the better, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just taking a picture of the screen, sorry.
I've definitely seen it on YouTube with just the amount of like views, and for me it's not the views per se, it's the comments, it's the questions, it's the engagement. And I'm really lucky in that the majority of my audience are really engaged, they want to learn, and it's great to be able to spread the knowledge almost like across the globe, because a lot of people in the States or different countries are in like India, Australia, and being able to tailor my advice to their climates and plant choices is really interesting as well. So yeah, there's definitely a movement, and I'm not sure it will slow down, which is good. I think it will carry on.
I think like going forward, the younger generations are learning so much more about sustainability and the environment. So I think that gardening and growing your own and everything is going to carry on increasing, which is great for horticulture and great for the planet. And hopefully we continue to have your lovely educational videos as well. So all newbies to the gardening industry can learn just exactly what they need to be doing in the correct manner. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast for a little good old gossip today. Yeah. It's been so nice chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
What are you doing for the rest of the day?
So the rest of the day I'm back at the design board, which I'm looking forward to, and then I've got some surprise video content this afternoon on Spring Has Sprung. So yeah, it's a nice mix today between designing and dirty fingernail gardening.
Cool. Well, that sounds like a perfect day to me. And it's also very sunny too. So, well, it is here anyway. So thank you so much, Lee. It's been really a pleasure. And we'll speak to you soon. Happy gardening.
Sure. Thank you, Ninja.
Thank you.
The music for the Plant-Based podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.